welcome to We're Not Wizards. We are the best, but not wizards. Enjoy the show!
Welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for April. And I cut the grass. Well, I cut the front grass for the first time tonight. It was with my new lawnmower, which was fantastic. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice when you get some kind of like shiny new equipment to just go out there and cutting the grass. I was cutting the grass like an absolute boss. It was the first time using my lawnmower, and I couldn't understand why everybody finds cutting the grass so difficult. Rather like today's guest, who's jumped onto Kickstarter. With a whirlwind, don't interrupt. Who's jumped onto Kickstarter. I'm not finished. You made me lose my track. Who's jumped onto Kickstarter like a person who's standing there with his new lawnmower, cutting away at that grass and wondering why everybody else is struggling. And then he's just leaving them in a kind of a ring of fire, you know, and he's standing there wearing his crown of ash. He's throwing out these cards. They're not kind of light cards. They're kind of dark cards. You could say they're almost like card noirs. So joining me from Card Noir to talk about Crown of Ash, but not mentioning whether or not he's done any gardening, I've got Richard Lawton.
Hello. How you doing? I don't actually have a garden, so very envious of your lawnmower. Is it a ride-on lawnmower?
It's not that big. It's just right. I was saying it. I was talking last night. I was recording last night with somebody else, and I was kind of telling them my. And this is going to kind of sound strange because it's going to be like, depending on the order of when I put this out, this one's probably going to go out before the one that actually has the story about how I got the lawnmower. So this is like the Christopher Nolan of podcasts, in which what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by telling you what happened, and then in the next episode you're going to find out. This is like my tenet of podcasts, is that we're going to work our way towards the middle and then we're going to go backwards again. You're going to discover in the next show how I came to get my lawnmower in the first place. But no, it's not a sit-on lawnmower. It's like, it was just like, it's not top of the range, but you know how when you go and buy something and you kind of like do like a, this'll do. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of like, well, this'll do. I'll get the middle cost one because the high cost one's just far too expensive. And the low cost one I know I'll break after 3 months. So I'll get something in the middle. But the place where I got the lawnmower had a really kind of morely expensive one, but it was really, really reduced. I had 15% off. So I went and got that. So I was out trying it tonight. So there you go. So
amazing.
So anyway, enough about you. You do have a lovely collection of plants, though.
I do. Well, they're not doing so well. See, this is the thing. So living in a London flat with no garden, kind of get the kind of indoor plants going, but they never seem to kind of thrive. They sort of start off really nice from wherever I get from, like garden centre or whatever, and then it's like a slow decline into oblivion, and then they get replaced. So they look okay at the minute, but they don't look as good as they did a year ago. And in a year's time, they'll probably be dead.
You talk to them?
So, sort of whisper to them.
Just like the plant whisperer. They do look
just take out my Kickstarter campaign frustration on them. Is
it potentially because if you're actually bringing in kind of lots and lots of cardboard, they're looking at the kind of the cardboard and going, they're going like this, they're going like, it's going to be us next. You just mark your words if he runs out of prototypes. Do you know what I mean? It's like what happened to Danny. I don't know. Danny was here. He was looking a bit poorly, and the next thing we know, he disappears, and this like kind of board game kind of turns up. So it kind of.
It doesn't help having cats as well. Like the cats just kind of make it their mission to sort of slowly destroy everything, and the plants seem to be a key thing. So they're kind of probably deflecting a lot from sort of nicer stuff. So actually, they're sacrificial plants.
So is that you're kind of basically kind of saving your clothes and your legs and your dinner and probably carpets and everything for the sake. Really, how many cats have you got?
Got two cats, which feature quite heavily in some of the game stuff, because if they're ever taking a picture of playing a game, they tend to be sort of near or on top of the game or pushing something important off the table. But yeah, two cats, very kind of active, noisy cats. You might hear them squealing in the background.
I'll edit them out. I won't edit them out. I was saying, I've got this chance of my dog at the moment. He's kind of settled because he's just been for a walk and it's been like a hot-ish day, which is why I got my grass cut. And he's just lying there now, so hopefully he's going to be chill and everything's kind of going to be fine. Let's put the way back clock a little bit way back, because what we like to do on this show is we like to find out a little bit about the shiny crown of the past before we step into the fiery headpiece of the present and the crown of ash of the future. So just going to find out a little bit more about yourself. I'm oh my goodness, it's going to sound like what's his name, Norman Osborn in Spider-Man. I'm a bit of an artist myself, but a bit of an idiot myself. I'm not saying you're an idiot. That kind of came out wrong. That didn't work. But
I think this is an astute observation.
No, I'm not saying. Yeah, I'm not saying a word. All right, from your background, and I'm not going to go through your background because that's up to you to tell me your background, because that's how it kind of works. But you're an artistic, creative type person, and has that always been the situation when you were growing up as a young child? Were you the kind of kid who was happiest with 15 pages of like A4 white paper and a set of crayons or a set of paint or just a set of pencils, and you would just like draw cars and planes and boats and horses and all that type of thing, or swords?
Yeah, I think so. I remember I always used to raid kind of the bathroom bin for like toilet roll tubes, and my mum used to have these kind of little plastic saline tubes that look kind of like rockets.
Oh, is that for the contact lenses? All right.
Yeah, and she got so annoyed with me kind of going through the bins that she then have like a separate pile just for me to kind of take and make into stuff. So yeah, definitely. Always been a creative person, and probably more creative than I am sort of academic and things like that. So it's one of those things where you go to school and they don't really put a lot of kind of praise on being good at kind of creative stuff. So it's sort of like no one goes up to you and says, it's like, oh, you're doing badly at drawing, so you're gonna have to stay behind and practice. You can be terrible at drawing and terrible at being creative, and you're kind of fine. If you're bad at kind of maths and English, then you got an issue. But so yeah, always been creative. Always, I think I kind of attribute it to being pretty dyslexic, which is sort of a positive thing, I think, when it comes to stuff like rulebook writing and things like that. Strangely enough,
was school kind of one of these situations where if you were doing like when you're sitting in your English class, you're like going, this is really putting me on a downer? Because it would have been frustrating more than anything else if you're looking at stuff and the English teacher's like saying, well, it's obvious it's this, and you're like going, it's not. You might as well be trying to tell me to write in kind of hieroglyphics because this isn't making any sense. And then going into your art class where you're just like this, I am king of all of I survey and kind of thing. But you're right about the creative thing. I think it was interesting the other night, and my partner's watching this like show on TV, the one about they get the singers to dress up, and I can't remember if it's called Superstar or whatever. And basically, they get 3 people who are going to be like Meatloaf or Robbie Williams or Cher or something like that, and they dress them up, and then they have like a sing-off. And then there was like this one person that's like singing like Adele, and it turns out like she's like a primary school teacher. And my wife turns to me and she goes, "Oh, just think of that. It's just like she's like so amazing. She should be so good. She should have her own show." And I says, "Yeah. Imagine if we weren't kind of held in a big capitalist society and people who were actually good at creative stuff could just go out and say, I'm a singer, I'm a dancer, I'm an artist, I'm really, really good at tap dancing. Watch me reach my kind of pinnacle," instead of them going, I'm currently having to work in a job just to make sure I've got kind of like shelter over my head, but I'm being a communist now. So there you go.
Well, being a school, I can see crossover skills of being a school teacher. That kind of booming school teacher voice. That definitely got to think. Okay, I can see how you have a like sort of very loud, booming, projecting voice.
But this person was amazing. They're like literally an amazing singer, and it's just like if I said to you, here's 25, 30, 40 grand a year, you just go off and do what you do. You know, you'd never know kind of what they achieve.
But that's quite interesting. It's like I always think there's a sort of a bit of a difference in being sort of creative and being good at like a craft. They're almost like there's crossover, but you can like some people can be really good at say kind of realistic style painting or something like that, and it can be more of a kind of skill set and a craft, as in like you're mastering the paints and realism and things like that. I think they might not have the kind of creative stuff of someone who's very kind of abstract, who maybe can't paint, but then could be incredibly creative. So it's kind of a weird thing of having like, you can absolutely, I think, have a really good skill in something like singing. Yes. You could be an amazing singer, but not be able to write a song.
No.
And you can be a terrible singer, but be an amazing songwriter. I mean, you've got plenty of those out there.
Yeah. And also I think in relation to art, I know there's some people that you can ask them to copy a particular style, or you know, you give them still life drawings and they'll just pump them out left, right and centre. But if you say to them, right, I want you to imagine a futuristic landscape, they're like going, no, I'm just, you know, they've kind of got, like you said, they've kind of got the skills, and then, but they've not the kind of I guess the ability to look at a situation and kind of create it from nothing. I think is like a different skill set kind of altogether. So did you left school and did you go and study kind of further at college or university or anything like that?
Yeah, so coming out of school with my like very middling grades, and then I went to college and studied graphic design as my only subject, and that was amazing because suddenly like, okay, I'm kind of good at all my subjects now, which was the first time ever, and that was really good. So I kind of left school, kind of what did we leave, 16, straight into college to do graphic design, and I've been doing that ever since. So I went to university and did graphic design as well, and went straight into a job after uni, doing kind of graphic design branding stuff, which is one of those things. I think this kind of graphic design is one of those ones where you will be pulling all these kind of creative individuals together. Potentially graphic designers are those kind of people who are really creative but not necessarily always particularly like skilled themselves in say like an illustration style or something like that. And that's actually a really good thing for being able to kind of pull the people you need, who you think, okay, you can look at say like a game. If you take game concepts, you can kind of come up with a theme and think, okay, it could be this style or it could be this style. You're not kind of nailed down to one type. And I think that's a really good kind of thing about being kind of graphic designer, is you kind of not weighted down to one style or something like that. I mean, the graphic design obviously varies quite a lot. People do have their kind of own specific style, but the kind of work I did was I went and did kind of very corporate stuff at uni, which is probably why I kind of started doing game design. A bit of a, you know, proper creative outlet for the corporate stuff is not always the most interesting.
Is it like kind of like here's the logo, but we want to change the color slightly, move this like kind of slightly bigger, and kind of I like the biggest,
If
the
you can.
most late. I think the thing that made me laugh out recently was them talking about the kind of the rebranding or the redesign of the BBC logo, and it turned out all they did was they just tapped tab twice and moved the moved the letters kind of a little bit wider apart, and that's kind of all they seem to have done. And goodness knows how much they would have spent kind of on meetings and graphic designers kind of like pitching back and forward about what they were going to do for this thing.
Stuff that like that kind of pains me, because I have been in those situations where we have done a kind of it would be considered like a full scale redesign where the right approach to the client will be, especially like the BBC, it's such an established company that changing that logo would be just probably the wrong thing to do. And even if the client comes to you and says something like, we want to change the logo, or like, we want a full scale redesign of the whole brand, that might be the wrong choice. And you pay a decent design agency or a consultancy a decent amount of money to prove that is the wrong choice. So it might seem like having almost the same logo is you're like, what have you paid for? But you've paid for basically someone to look into everything and decide that that's the best course of action, is to kind of almost stick with it. But then there's also a lot of behind the scenes stuff to say branding for a company, stuff like tone of voice and kind of visual language, you call it, which is everything that isn't the logo. So logos, especially nowadays, logos are, it's kind of what I specialized in at uni, and they've never been so unimportant. They used to be a really big deal back in the day when you used to have kind of letter-headed paper and things like that. And your communications were really kind of some text and your logo, and that was like your company. And now people see so much more from your company all the time. So they'll see, your social posts, they see your, even free stuff. It used to be that if you paid for a billboard, that's when you'd see a company's, sort of external communications, and you'd go, okay, that's their style. But now you kind of see stuff all the time. Advertising super cheap, it's super accessible. So yeah, the logo may not change, but everything behind the scenes may have changed. And they may have explored new options for logos, and they were just the wrong choice. I do, when you see these kind of things where, I remember, was it like Haringey Council or something? It was like one of the London boroughs did this horrendous logo redesign. It cost like 3 million quid or something.
I've got one better than that. Do you remember when Royal Mail got privatised and tried to change its name to Consignia?
Insignia, yeah.
And it's almost like I start to...
Was that Post Office or was it Royal Mail?
I think it might have been the actual Royal Mail itself, because I don't know if it's like one of those... what do they call it? It's like an event where everybody thinks that it's actually happened. It's Mandela effect, where you actually think, you believe it's happened, but it turns out it actually never ever happened at all. And as time goes on, I'm starting to think, did the Royal Mail at some point, kind of like in the space of 6 months, do a complete name change, redesign, logo design, roll it all out, and then roll it all back again? And they never, I don't think they ever got to the bottom of how much it cost. I think it was it was a lot of millions to kind of do that.
Oh yeah, especially if they backtracked it, because that was probably I always can see the logic behind these things, because I've been there I can almost see the brief. I've been there so many times. I can see that they probably went, right, Post Office or Royal Mail is too restrictive, and people around the world want to be dealing with the Royal Mail.
Yeah.
So we want something that's going to be global, and it's going to basically mean they can take their brand and start doing effectively when you think of like DPD, which is, I think it's Deutsche Post. Is what it stands for. We don't think about that because it's just DB. If they were, so they probably went, oh, we want to be the Deutsche Post for the Royal Mail, and did Consignia and alienated everyone who would use the Royal Mail, and then we're like, yeah, this isn't working. So I can see what happened there, but yeah, probably the wrong choice. Every is a great example of like how you can just like basically put a new coat of paint over an absolutely failing company, and we'll call it something
I
different.
heard somebody say they've just poured another tub of glitter over the turd that is Hermes, but they've not.
The way it looks like the jumbling letters as well, where it's like, hey, I guess that's probably we're like, yeah, it's going to mean that we do a bit of everything. We're not one brand.
I just looked at chaos. I just looked at meant chaos. It's literally like the last time I seen anything like that was I don't know if you ever watched Loki on Disney Plus.
Oh, I haven't, no.
And what they did is every single week they basically had the Loki kind of this lovely kind of script font, but then they changed the letters into different kind of fonts, so it looked like it was obviously to represent the kind of the multiverse, and it was to represent the fact that he was in a chaotic state of mind because he was meeting all these different kind of versions of himself. And that was kind of like when I looked at Every, I just went, what have you done? What have you done?
But it's either that or kind of, I think, is it the kind of ransom note you've cut letters out of a magazine?
So we've got your parcel.
You want it.
It's literally, isn't it? Because I think there's been jokes about people saying when they get a slip through the door or something, or they get the notification email, it's like it is literally like a ransom note. It's like, we've got your parcel. It's like, okay, how much do I need to pay you to make sure I actually get my parcel kind of thing? So that
they're going to send you a little piece
exactly.
of it to prove they
going to send you a meeple at a time.
Yeah.
So moving on. It doesn't, it doesn't matter. I mean, if people want to go and talk board games, they can go talk board games. That's not the point of this.
Yeah, we're
talking branding and one of my friends, they design fonts for a living. And the stories they can tell you, and it's just, one of these days I'm actually going to get them on the show just to spend an hour talking about the importance of fonts and stuff like that, because that's what they do. But where did the world of you and cardboard kind of start to collide? Because I think it's a slightly different kind of approach from where maybe a lot of people kind of first got cut their teeth on it.
In terms of sort of game design stuff, I mean, I think I've been game designing without realizing it for years. It's one of those things where I think a lot of people who are into board gaming and sort of end up becoming game designers have a similar thing where when you were stuck with the kind of bad board games you had as a kid, and you started house ruling them and things like that, effectively you're doing a bit of game design.
Yeah.
You're thinking about, I don't like that rule, and what can I do? And that kind of stuff I've just always done. And I hadn't really, I only really got brought into the world of kind of modern board gaming when sort of I met my girlfriend, and she was, I say modern board gaming, so her family have always played sort of slightly more advanced board games than I had. I had like Kaplunk and Monopoly and some kind of really strange ones that I found in charity shops. I kind of thought, yeah, I'll get them and then just create my own rules. But her family are really into, they're going to love Talisman, if you've ever played Talisman.
Yeah.
And it's one of those kind of, like, I'd never played a game like it. And they have got, I think it's the 3rd edition or 2nd edition, they've got like the one in the early 90s. And it's such a beautifully broken game, but it's a lot of fun.
Become a frog and then die. It's like rings of hate all the way around, and it's just like it's the game. It's funny because it literally has expansions that expand the size of the game. That all it does is it just makes the external side of it kind of bigger. It is literally an onion of a game, and I know. John Cage from Polyhedron Collider. He has always loved Talisman more than is healthy for a grown man who is a father of 2 kids, and he will defend that game, to his last breath. Yeah. Myself, I'm not too fussed.
Yeah, I think this is the same thing. My girlfriend loves it, and it's one of those things we play it like once a year for her birthday, because that's all I can like bring myself to do, and it lasts about 11 hours. But it is fun. It's one of those things where it breaks every modern sort of rule of board game is like you've got roll and move.
Yeah.
You've got a slight choice. You can go left or
Yeah.
right. This is great. So you got roll and move, but you also have adventure decks, which is incredibly random, and that's what the expansions are meant to, I think, fix. Is that they go, well, that one's hard and that one's sort of medium. It's like, okay, but your first turn you can pick a like incredibly strong creature pops up, and you got injured, whatever. There's so many random elements to it, and you end up with these kind of 10,000 cards you have to keep track of. You're like, wait, I've got this ability and this ability, and then you become a toad and you drop everything. And I think it's a great one if you've just become, like your friend, a new dad. It's a great one to introduce to your kids and be like, here's the disappointment of life, kids. You'll eventually become a toad.
You don't come back inside. It'll be Talisman for the rest of the weekend. And they'll be like, oh no, don't do that. We're sitting here. It's either that, playing Talisman. You don't finish your dinner? Talisman. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning? Talisman. And that's I mean, this is, I think that's a way to deal with discipline in schools as well. Do you know what I mean? If you just keep interrupting the class, it'll be double Talisman at the end of the day. Oh no, don't do that, not double Talisman. Single Talisman, you've got up to Talisman detention. I mean, there's an expansion for you.
It's one of those like guilty pleasure games. I think when I first played it, I was actually pretty impressed that it felt like a proper old school RPG, sort of like a Morrowind or a Skyrim in the game world, computer game world. Because it feels especially like a sort of like a Skyrim thing, because it feels glitchy and broken and sort of
needs
buggy,
patched.
but the bones are good, and like I like the if you're one of those people who's willing to do a bit of sort of role play in a non-role playing game, get into it. I think it's got some good things to it. Like I really like it, but I think that as my introduction to the sort of more modern games, and then obviously I was like, wow, this is incredible, and I started looking at what else is out there. But that one's one of those things that every time I come back to it, knowing a bit more about what else is out there and being in the kind of design circles now, I'm like, oh god, that's broken. Like, oh, that should be like this. But I don't know. It's wonderful in its own way. But yeah, I think if you designed it in 21st century, it would be panned on BGG.
I've seen. I mean, to be perfectly honest, if they released it today, there would probably still be people that would defend it, especially if it had tons of minis. If they kind of said, here's a game where you put rings around it, and how many minis? It's got 178 minis, various different sizes, and it's like, quick, we've got to back out the door. So how do you end up at Crown of Ash then?
So this is, I was banding around a lot of game ideas once I kind of got into the sort of thought like, oh, I can do this. This is easy. I think I don't know if that's the kind of approach every game has. It's like, yeah, this would be easy. I'll put it on Kickstarter. I'll make £1 million, and then I just retire and play games the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally what Eric Lang tweets every Monday morning. You know, this is the easiest job in the world. Just banked another couple of million. I don't know what to do with all this money. In fact, you know what? I tell you, the best place to go is if you'd want to have like a night where you don't pay for anything, is hanging about with a group of fully funded Kickstarter successful board game designers, because I tell you, they fight over themselves about who's paying for everything. Everything's top class, and it's like you don't put your hand in your pocket all night. And then I woke up, and it was a horrific fever dream.
Yeah, it's like you see that go to the house and all their furniture is just their unsold board games.
They've literally, it's all the Kickstarters that they've backed. Created 5, backed 723.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they just like put all the money they make from Kickstarter into other Kickstarters.
Eric Lang's house is just unk.
It's just ink. It's an ink doorway. It's got Chaos of the Old World as his pension. You know, they all of a sudden
that's
disappeared
pretty
overnight. They all disappeared overnight when Fantasy Flight, I think, stopped making them. So he's like, he went into the warehouse and he was driving a truck with 50,000 boxes. And then there's like on the board game groups, on occasionally you get some guy popping up, you know, Derek Lang selling an in-shrink copy of Chaos in the Old World for £500, and that's what he does. I'm telling you,
that's not a bad.
He's a dealer.
I have to try and take that approach with Crown of Ash, like extreme limitedness.
So, tell us about the game. I mean, we're 30 minutes in to the podcast. So I always do this though. We kind of have a chat, then it's like, oh, do we have to talk about the board game then? It's like, I shouldn't have really started a board game podcast. Really, I'm kind of like, I am the consignia of the board game podcast world. But I kind of get halfway through and I go, oh, it was a mistake doing it about board games. I should have done it about something else. I should have just said, do you want to come on and have a conversation? But, you know, there you go. What was the inspiration for Crown of Ash, and what kind of game is it?
So Crown of Ash is a worker placement area control game. So you play as sort of warring necromancers, which has a kind of thing of you play these necromancers, you're gathering resources by placing your workers out onto the board. You're building up the kingdom, which basically offers you, by building new buildings, you get more victory points at the end of the round, which is how it's scored. But also you give kind of more resources to everyone else on the board, so they can come to your spaces, and you get a little reward if they use your space and things like that. And you're raising this army of undead to your hand, and you use those to attack and control the different areas on the board, which are these kind of victory point scoring buildings. But the game started as inspired by like Hell's Kitchen, that sort of like Gordon Ramsay show.
Oh, right, okay.
It's quite weird. This is kind of the game design journey. I mean, like, I started off thinking, okay, I want to do this kind of board game, which is almost like farm to table sort of thing, but with some conflict. So everyone controls, say, a resource for an ingredient, and then you have these customers to serve. And that kind of spawned the idea, okay, so you've got to gather the ingredients and use those to serve a customer, and that'll give you victory points. And the ingredients you have, you basically harvest your ingredients. And I had this track at one point where the ingredients went from fresh to like rotten, and after they were rotten, they were in the bin. And it was, so I had this thing where it was more beneficial to like sell that ingredients to the other players. Yes. And the freshness thing of, if you sell kind of poor quality ingredients, there was a small chance that you could like poison the customer and something bad. So that was the kind of initial thinking of the game, which is mad to think where it is now. It's so far away. But yeah, that was the initial thought. And I thought, okay, you need to have some kind of way of being able to take these ingredients, because otherwise the resources have to be all the same value, and they have to be, it becomes very tricky to actually have some intertwining strategy other than just I'm sort of bartering with you, which is always a tricky. So I was like, okay, I need some way of not controlling wholeheartedly all these resources, and then a way of taking them off the other players. So I was like, okay, it feels like it needs a battle mechanic or some kind of mechanic like that. And I also thought that kind of the reward of just, you've got the ingredients, you've exchanged them for a customer, the idea being that all the players are competing for the same sort of customers, that felt a bit like, okay, you got your card, you're going to score it, that's it. Yeah. So then I thought, okay, if it needs this battle mechanic, if those customers, they like now are actually like sort of monsters, that you could recruit to your army, and then you can take the ingredients off other people. That feels cool. And there was this weird crossover point where I still had the kind of freshness of the ingredient, which didn't really make sense, because it was like, okay, that doesn't really make sense. So that kind of maintained for a little bit when I was like, no, I'm scrapping that. And actually the necromancer thing came from the idea of it was a bit kind of miserable when you initially had your fighters and you were attacking someone, you lost, and at one point you just discarded them. And that was a bit sort of sad. You're like, oh, I just spent so much time raising those. And so I was like, okay, what if you're sort of a necromancer and these are undead creatures and you're using alchemy, which is sort of the ingredients thing, makes sense. And then those can all come back to life at the end of the round because you're a necromancer. And actually, even though it's kind of became quite a dark theme, the theme is to make the game sort of lighter and make things less punishing. And so that was the kind of foundations of it. It kind of morphed into this game about sort of being an undead necromancer, and then around with the theme of it being not that punishing, of having this kind of mechanic where when you enter a battle with someone, win or lose, you always get something. It's very much the kind of Eric Lang sort of Loki card in Blood Rage.
It just turns up. In relation to because your job, because you are le designer graphique.
Yeah.
Did you have to control actually creating art assets for the game? Because I can imagine that what happens is that because normally my idea of game design is I've got 15 bits of paper with some numbers and a blob on it just to represent the different stuff. And I'm laying it down on a bigger kind of play mat and I just see if it works and play it back on. With you being a graphic designer, will you kind of have it? Is there any point where you actually said, look, I need to just concentrate on the game mechanics and making sure it works rather than, hey, look, I've just spent, an hour and a half making these fabulous looking bread rolls for something that turns out you were never going to kind of use?
Yeah, absolutely a blessing and a curse. I think in terms of the sort of actual mechanics of a game, being a graphic designer just slows you right down because you can't help but want to make things look better than they need to be. It's definitely at that early stage where you just need to get like blobs on a piece of paper. Basically, you need to chop up some paper, you need to put some numbers on it, and you need to get it tested. I wasted so much time thinking about kind of art styles and making it look really good when it was just nowhere near being done. To the point where actually I think it's a negative as well, because if you show scraps of paper with biro on to someone and do a playtest, they give you the feedback as if it's a first playtest, right? So they're thinking about the fundamentals of what's happening here. If you, like I was doing for a long time, properly trying to design stuff, and it's even if I'm being quick, it looks it looks fairly put together. You can make something fairly quickly look almost quite professional.
No, tell us how really good you are. Go on. Go on.
But you get feedback as if it's further down the line, which sometimes is misleading. So someone will play a game, when playtest a game, it's the first time you've playtested it and you've made it look fairly good, and they'll be like, oh, this game's broken, and they're kind of surprised, and it's almost like they have a really negative reaction to it, where you're thinking, you probably wouldn't have given me that same, or you would have given me feedback on a different level if I'd showed you pen and paper.
I think is that not down to the fact that for a lot of the Kickstarter campaigns, a lot of the art is kind of like placeholder art. I've done my share of kind of previews for Kickstarters, and I would say a good 80% of them, they're like, please be aware that the art is just like placeholder art, and I know you see like one goblin and there's 16 of them, but there is going to be different art for each of them. It depends on how we kind of get funded. So I can imagine if somebody's actually going through this and going, this looks amazing, then they are probably going to be like, well, this must be close. I think, because as I say, it's one of the main sort of reasons for people going to Kickstarter is to kind of get art and the graphics and everything like that kind of funded, because, art, as we know, kind of should cost money. So you held back that. Then you got to a point where you're happy with it. And then did you pitch it to publishers? Because I can imagine if you spent time, if you went in and went, right, I'm here, I'm happy, I'm ready to go with this, that you'd be able to rock up to like a publisher and say, here, this, I mean, I pretty much, the art, you don't, because I can imagine somebody getting presented with a game, unless they're deciding to completely reskin it and change the theme, the first thing they look at is, well, we're going to have to spend, 6K, 7K, 8K getting the kind of the art sorted out for this, whereas you're coming up with a box going, there you go, it's all ready to go, and the mechanics are there, we just have to maybe do a bit of time in the development kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's when sort of the graphic designer part becomes a blessing towards the end, is that if you're going to do a Kickstarter, you want to have some kind of skills, I think, that you can bring to the publishing process. I think if you're just a game designer, and you've got nothing you can bring to kind of the marketing side of it, the visual side of it, if you're not an illustrator, a graphic designer, an animator, or anything like that, then that Kickstarter is going to cost you a lot of money, and you might not have the knowledge to know visually what's going to work. And Kickstarter is such a visual thing. I mean, people, if it doesn't have good art, it doesn't matter really if it's an amazing game, it probably won't fund. Which is, I mean, we see games that don't have amazing art like go crazy all the time, but I don't think I've ever seen them be Kickstarters. Maybe it was Terraforming Mars a Kickstarter?
Don't get me started on Terraforming Mars. That's literally like when, the old paperclip popped up on Windows and said, I see you're trying to design a game. Would you like to see some pictures from my stock footage? It's quite funny because there is a kind of an ongoing joke between me and Stronghold about Terraforming Mars. I always said that they should do like a version of Horses from Hell, and call it Terror Farming Mares, basically. I mean, that's what I thought they should go with it. Terraforming. Let's not, because it's one of the questions. If you want to get into their Facebook group or private group, one of the questions is, do you like Terraforming Mars? No. Or yes, or no in capitals. And that's like one of the questions. It's always been a joke. It's just like my whole thing about Terraforming Mars was I did play it and I had a really, really bad time.
Sure.
I had a really, and it just kind of put me off, actually, kind of like, it was like one of these things where like everything, do you know how you learn a game? And everything that could possibly happen in a game to go wrong, it was just generally, I didn't get half the rules, I didn't understand kind of half the rules weren't explained well. Halfway through the game, that stupid magazine thin paper thing that controls all your stuff, somebody bumped the table, so all my cubes went to one side. I just not. So that is my story of my kind of dislike for Terraforming Mars.
But that is kind of a keeks above, like, I think when you're going to self-publish a game, for me, it's a design project too. Like this is a portfolio piece for me, I guess, because I can kind of use this in my professional life and say, okay, I did all this stuff myself. I hired the illustrators and things like that. There's definitely a lot of transferable skills there, which means I could keep that cost down. And it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And that's why I didn't bother publishing it, going to publishers, because I knew I was going to self-publish it, just because I was like, I'm kind of up to this challenge. I think I've got there's enough kind of crossover skills in my day job that I really think I can kind of do this well. I don't regret it. It's fun. It's been a really good challenge. Like I learned so much from this. I've learned so much preparing for this Kickstarter campaign about marketing and things like that, other skills that you have to have, than I have in my day job for the last few years.
How did what was it like stepping into the world of kind of marketing? Because I'm guessing that in your job that you would have you've probably, if you're talking about kind of, I guess, kind of briefs and meetings and stuff like that, that you would have probably spent some time in the presence of the marketing departments of some places, probably some time kind of shaking your head and going, bloody can't do that, what are you talking about, you idiot? But was it a kind of a strange situation to be in on the other side, where you're going, oh my goodness, I really need to kind of I need to get the word out about this game, how am I going to do that?
It's been eye-opening, being almost the client side, right? I'm the client at the minute for myself running this campaign. I think it's everyone's least favorite part of self-publishing is the marketing. It's probably the hardest part. It's the bit that you really have to kind of be confident to kind of toot your own horn, talk yourself up, and this is things that, especially to me, I hate kind of saying, oh yeah, I'm great, this is great. You know, I'm not a big fan of selling or sales in general. And marketing is sales, I guess. Like, you're basically trying to show people, you can try and take someone on a journey. Like, I'm trying to communicate to someone why they should love this game in a very crowded sort of market. But when it comes to board game design, you don't think about that there's so many games out there now, and it's so hard to kind of find what's different about yours, and I think that's the hardest thing with self-publishing, is you go, okay, it's really hard to be very kind of analytical of it. Probably if I was getting approached by a game designer, someone trying to self-publish to do the marketing, I'd have this much kind of more objective look at it, where I can go, I think this is going to be the approach we go for. You know, the art's really strong in this game, or this is really strong in this game. We're going to really hammer down on that, and we're going to do this approach. But the world of kind of corporate design is just, of corporate sort of advertising and things like that, working is so different. In board game design is one of those things where I don't know if it's a completely unique sort of industry, but the customers are so involved in the process, effectively, that your backers will probably see your game and want to see it for like a year prior.
Oh yeah.
Things where people will come up and go, I want to basically see that you've been at conventions a year ago, and I want to see the process, and I'm interested in the process, which is nice. It's great, and it's amazing for meeting. You kind of meet people at where we exhibited somewhere with an early prototype 2 years ago, and they come and back the campaign now, and they've kind of been along the process the entire time, and that's really lovely. That's the ideal, but that's the kind of stuff you have to do to fund. I think you have to really create connections with people on a very personal level. At least a lot of people. There are always just people who just will see an ad, see some nice artwork, and back the game, but to get those kind of day one backers in, a lot of that has to be through actually almost becoming friends with people through the game, and them seeing a lot of process. And I can't think of another. Maybe video game design, when people do kind of like alpha.
I don't even know if video games, because I think that I think even in video games there's like a disconnect. I mean, I'll get emails from kind of PR companies for video games. You know what I mean? Here's our version of Slay the Spire. You know, it's called Kill the Spirit, and it's a kind of a multi-combat card game kind of thing. But there's a PR company. I don't think, and I used to do kind of video game reviews, I don't think, and this was years ago, but I don't think there was any point where I was actually speaking directly to the video game designer or the design crew. I think there was always somebody that specialised in the marketing. Whereas with board games, because there's so many of them that are not one-man crew, but there's so many of them that it is like one or two people doing kind of a multitude of roles that you can end up speaking to. And that's probably why this podcast has given me access to so many different people. It's because 9 times out of 10, I can actually speak to the owner of the company, the person they're also making the decisions. They're usually the game designer. I mean, like a month and a bit ago, I had Jamie Stegmaier on the show.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
cool.
I can't imagine. You'd be saying, well, one of the most, probably the most successful kind of modern board game kind of publishing companies out there. I couldn't imagine going to, say, FromSoft or, or Blizzard or any of these other video game companies, even the company that made, like, say, Slay the Spire. I can't imagine rocking up and actually sending them a message asking them to come on talk on the podcast and them actually saying, yes, I can. I'm very lucky that I've got that. I mean, like I was joking aside, I mean, I've had people from Steamforge on, people from Mantic have been on, I've actually had Stephen Bonacore from Stronghold Games, and we talked about Terraforming Mars as well. So they've been on the show. But I can't imagine doing that in the same level of kind of like a video game, because there seems to be this kind of wall of PR and kind of marketing that are not protection, but they're just not, it just seems to be a bigger industry, maybe with more money in it.
I think the board game communities is a lot more, they care a lot more about who creates their game, and it is really unique. The Stagmeyer, Stonemeyer approach, Jamie Stagmeyer, if you go to the website to get, say, replacement parts, he will reply. But I assume it's him. I can't imagine that he wouldn't. It would pretend it was him. But he'll reply to all of the comments saying, we'll sort this out for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's very hands on. Yeah, no. I mean, the guy's very, very hands on. I can't, as I say, I can't imagine, Shigeru Miyamoto. Answering comments on kind of like, what do you think of the, like, what are you going to think about the next kind of Mario game? I can't imagine him kind of chipping in and having anything to kind of do that. But also on the same time of things, and I'm guessing I'm looking at when I look at your Kickstarter page, there's going to be very few people that have provided you with like preview content and video content that are doing this on a professional level. And what that means is that is what they do as a job. It is still I mean, and no doubt you put a post on the Board Game Reviewers and media page, and to say, is anybody interested in doing a preview of this game? And you would have had tons and tons of people, and I can guarantee you that probably 98 to 99% of them will be getting up the next day to do a kind of like a normal 9-to-5 job. And I think that's a huge difference in the kind of the industry.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's super nice, but it also means that we're held to like a lot higher standard, because people do know you personally almost. You can't kind of hide behind this kind of, it's this Stonemeyer thing that when something goes wrong, he will answer for it himself, which is great.
I mean, he is, yeah. But
you can't shrug off things as like, oh, it's a big company, and you know who to go to. You can contact them directly, and that's really unique in board games, of having that kind of level of communication, level of like internal knowledge of that. But then also it's a unique thing where a lot of Kickstarter games, that people are willing to wait a year or 2 years for their product because they believe in it, and they're happy to kind of purchase something. There are games, I think there's a few things I've backed that 3 years later aren't even near, sort of thing. And
I think we're actually starting to see that now. I think that in many ways there's people are opening their back door to discover they've got a yard full of chickens that have just appeared.
Yeah,
because I know, like, off the top of my head, I mean, Peterson Games have taken to, we're going to be developing one game at a time. I know that Mythic Games have they've got, like, I think a game outstanding, Monstrosity or Monster City or something like that, but they've also they've done a massive sale on every single kind of IP that they're currently working with. They've got a huge sale on at their website. I think it's like 40% off all of their stuff. So I think there's a lot of guys that they did well, or they were doing really, really well during the pandemic. Over the pandemic, they were still doing quite well, and then all of a sudden, kind of shipping costs and costs that were coming in from other places have all kind of hit them, and I think they're kind of on the back foot. In terms of Crown of Ash, the artwork is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, there's no two ways about this. I'm getting kind of, when I first looked at it, there was two things I kind of thought. One thing I thought was it reminded me very much, and I don't know if you've seen this game or any of the games, I don't know, but Catacombs. The art by Kwanchai Moria. I think it's because a lot of their art is on kind of like a white background, where it's just you're completely focused on the kind of character. And I've heard a lot of people kind of talk about kind of like the artwork in this is kind of stunning, and I think having it kind of almost there and ready to go and can complete kind of does an awful lot to kind of sell the kind of the story, and it certainly gives you
one thing that we've had to do. I think people will, especially small creators, so there's a couple of things I think if you're a small creator to get that confidence to people, which is really hard I think now, because like you said, a lot of things have gone wrong and people have been burned a lot. Is having a finished product. I think the days of funding a concept is just probably gone for small creators. So this is, I think I've got one outstanding piece of artwork which actually I think he sent through today, so I'll be announcing that soon, and then that's it, done. Every piece of artwork is done. And I've also it's like I skipped a step with the pre-production part, so the kind of game you can see behind me that no one else can see, which is
worried it's going to go on fire. It's sitting on the radiator. It's literally giving me nerves. I'm just expecting it to spark.
But this
see, that's the police. Do you hear that noise, that siren in the background? That's the police coming out to arrest you for making me nervous. I've put a kind of a complaint in.
But how we did the prototypes is we got them produced by the end factory in China. So the advantage of that is that it's the end stocks. It's basically the pre-production sample you'd get before going to print is already here, which means speeds up that process. You're seeing all the final stuff. You know everything's possible. You have all the conversations you need to have with your printer.
Yes.
But also, it takes a lot longer to get to you. It took 6 months for that to arrive. So there's got a few components in that aren't in the final game. But but it's little things like this, I think, that allow. So I've put like a year to deliver, I think. So by next March, it'll be arriving in people's doors. But I've left that pretty conservative. I think a year's for a first time creator. I'm like, I'll probably need that year. But I think going forward, it's not a bad thing. I think that you go, okay, it's a finished game. The mechanics are done. All the artwork's done. I literally just have to sort out whatever stretch goals we've done, which obviously haven't been put onto the artwork, and press print. And that's as streamlined as it can possibly be.
Job done. Easy.
Well, it's not easy, but it definitely proves that you can do it when you're seeing the content creators using effectively the final copy of the game.
Yes.
This isn't one that I've sort of boshed together. I think that's the kind of thing that it's just building confidence now. I think a lot of the confidence in Kickstarter model has been knocked, and actually I've tried to do the kind of Stonemaier thing of being putting myself on the game page and replying to the comments myself, and not pretending I'm this huge company of 20 people, because I think if you pretend you're 20 people, people will expect you to reply to comments at 3 a.m. when I'm asleep, sort of thing. I think the board game community is a nice community that they'll help you out. If you pretend that you're a 50-man company, people expect the kind of service of a 50-man company. They won't give you the benefit of doubt. They won't give you, they'll expect to reply in 20 minutes, which they should. You'll be a huge company, but also when your campaign does 30 grand, which it's amazing. I'm ecstatic with that. people will be thinking, oh, this is going to be one of those ones that cancels because it didn't get 1 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there was that for a while. I think there was people putting kind of like five grand targets and then going, oh, we made our target, but we've not made enough to make a game. And it's like, that's not how maths works. Basically.
It is tricky because the Kickstarter algorithm is like, no, you basically have to fund in those first 24 hours for it to push you at all.
Yeah.
So it definitely incentivizes low funding goals.
Yes.
The Kickstarter. But it just means that if someone sees a low funding goal that's genuine, like I put the funding goal, which would basically cover the print cost, the print and freight. So we get to people's doors, but I wouldn't have got any of the illustration money I put in. But I mean, I kept the cost down because I did the design myself, which definitely means that I didn't have to recoup as bigger amount. But I can see why these companies who've got lots of miniatures need to fund 500 grand. Or was it the Kingdom Come Deliverance? Was that one?
Is it Kingdom Death Monster one?
Oh, not Kingdom Death. Did you see the one? It was based on a computer game. It was I think it was Kingdom Come.
Oh right, yeah.
And they raised, was it $500,000 and they needed 1 million minimum. Like, I don't know what they were thinking, but then you think they had the amount of miniatures they had and stuff. Those mold costs, I think people don't understand this when stuff like miniatures, they're really cheap to produce individually, but the mold costs per miniature are probably like £3,000 to £5,000, not including the sculpting cost. So the base cost of each one of those little minis might be $5,000 to $10,000, and then you for a really nice mini, if you've got 100 minis in your game, all unique sculpts, you could be looking at like £1 million worth of, or like 10 grand a pop. You've got 100 minis, that's £1 million. So the actual cost to produce those minis is pennies, but the base cost that goes into it could be
to get it going,
hundreds of thousands. I mean, maybe not £1 million, but a huge cost. So when you've got a game like that, that's why the funding goal's not genuine, because they'll say we actually need $200,000 just to get the minis paid for.
Yeah, just to kind of make some money, which is why I think is when you see games with minis, it's not unusual to see a Kickstarter from the same company again and again and again and again and again. And I think sometimes in some cases you're always playing a little bit of catch up kind of financially, unless you've got like a game that's got a tail. In terms of funding, what's the cost of entry on Crown of Ash?
It's £45 is the base game,
right?
Which is about, I think it's about $53, $54, something like that. €52.
Look. Let's check. I'm going on it. I'm going on it just now. I'm going to look on it.
It does see the rates change.
It does actually. It's $54 and €51, and then you've got the Crown of Ash Deluxe pledge.
Yes, the Deluxe pledge adds in basically nice screen printed bags that speed up the start of the game. So you can basically just hand each player their sort of starting stuff and you're good to go. Also some special dice and some nice enamel control tokens.
And then for £80 you've got the all-in pledge, which contains the Rising Fighters module, 37 fighter standees, and then
now since a stretch goal.
Yeah, and then you've got the founders, the big money, the £600 founders pledge, which has got like everything. You get a hand-signed prototype copy.
Yeah,
you know
that's going to be. I mean, that's there. If someone, the thing about they say about Kickstarters is you shouldn't put like a ceiling on what people are willing to give, especially to small-time creators, because there are people out there who will just really want to help you out, and potentially £600 is just not a lot to them. That's a lot to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It helps, bring back some of those costs, but on stuff like the prototypes and things like that, which are expensive. But yeah, so I've kind of tried to be as nice as possible with the pledges. Like there's no gameplay stuck behind a paywall.
Yeah.
the deluxe and the all-in stuff, it basically just adds in nice to haves. It streamlines a few of the things, like the little miniatures, not miniatures, the standees. They look good, but also just that allows you to speed up the end game scoring. So there is sort of a practical purpose to them as well. Basically, when you raise your fighter, you replace it with the standee, and then you put that card in a little pile beside you, and then when you do the end game scoring for the fighters you've raised, it's just there in a stack. Whereas on the base game, you just have to take them back off the board.
Yeah.
Not that big a deal, but there is a functional process.
Saves a bit of time.
But gameplay wise, you get the same game if you want to spend £45 or want to spend £80.
Cool.
But yeah, it's pricing's a bit of a dark art. It's one of those things where it's tricky. But I've tried to be really clever with I think this is where having a print design background really helps too, is I know where the costs become high or higher in print production. So all the punch boards are all the same die cut, which basically means they only have to drill out one piece of like one die.
Yeah.
And then you're just paying for you actually then get the advantage of 3 punch boards. It's like you're spending 3 times as much, or you're ordering 3 times as much. And little things like that. So I've tried to be as clever as possible with the components and things to bring that cost down to I can. But even £45, it's tough to make any money on this. So that if I get my money, if I break even, I'll be ecstatic. This is
I was always like, and this is an open invitation if you're listening to this, and if you have done a Kickstarter and it's been funded, I'd love somebody to come on and just go through all of the costs, everything from. I'd love somebody to just go, right, okay, this is how much we spent on previews, this is how much we spent on art, this is how much we spent on production, this is how much we spent on kind of freight, shipping, mistakes, errata, errors, everything like that, and just to get a full. But I think it's still one of these things where, again, it's kind of like it's very personal to each person that it becomes the kind of their baby. And again, I think going back to Jamie, he's Jamie Stegmaier. He has released kind of like, this is the balance sheet, this is what we've sold, which is I think is kind of like it gives you kind of a good indication of where things are. If people are looking for an indication of where you are, where can you find you on the internet webs, Mr. Lawton?
So things like Instagram, Facebook, it's Card Noir, which is that's the publishing name. There is a Crown of Ash group, or Crown of Ash. If you Google that, they'll come up with the Crown of Ash website and lead you to the Kickstarter. But yeah, I'm an Instagram guy. I think that's where I sit. That's where I kind of spend the most time. So yeah, you can add me on Instagram. I think it's just card_noir.
So there you go. And what I'll do is I'll put all the links in the show notes so that we've got notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then just go to the internet webs and search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us in all the different places where the internet webs kind of hang out online on the electric server things. I don't know. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter, and we've got our blog, which is We're Not Wizards Tabletop.com. You can find the podcast at We're Not Wizards.com. You can find us in all the different podcast catchers of choice. If you are somebody who's designing, developing, marketing a game, anything to do in the tabletop industry, if you're in social media, anything along those lines, and you fancy coming on and having a chat, then drop us a message and we'll talk about getting you on at some point. If you like what you've listened to tonight, then consider going to the Apple Podcast and giving us a rating or giving us a review. If you are going to be giving us a rating, then don't give us 10 stars because it makes me big-headed, but on the other side, don't give us a 1 star because it makes me cry. Give me something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average. I'm just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Mr. Richard Lawton. Thank you for guesting on the show. And there's only a couple more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Richard?
I don't think so.
That's not the answer I was looking for. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So everybody's doing this at the moment. It's really annoying me. It's a goodbye from Richard. Say goodbye, Richard.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll sixes, make something awful, and get yourself a crown of ash. I don't know what's going to rhyme with mash. Instead of some potato mash, get yourself a crown of mash. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.